Okay, everybody just left me, so we did not have time to do these 5 last examples. So I hope that you take a few minutes and give them a try and see what possible things that you are struggling with so that you can ask some questions. So the first one here says, I've given you the graph of f of x. We've used this graph a couple times in class already, and we're going to do negative f of x plus 2. So first thing I want to do is I just want to write down what are the things happening to this graph. So first thing I notice is the plus 2 means that the graph is going to go up 2 units. And then this negative out front means that I am going to multiply my y values by -1. And the reason I'm multiplying the y values by -1, again, is because that negative is outside of the function, okay? The f of x means my y values. The order of importance is we should always do our multiplication before our addition and subtraction. It just makes this process easier. So first thing is I'm going to multiply all the y values by -1. So the y value of this first point is 0, so it stays 0. The y value of this next point is 3. So when I multiply by -1, it becomes -3. The y value here is 0. This is -3. So when I multiply by -1, it becomes +3 and then 0. So what I've done is I've reflected this graph about the x-axis. That's what multiplying by the y values by -1 does. And now I'm going to take that graph and I'm going to move the whole thing up 2. So this leftmost point goes 1, 2 up. This point here goes, it goes 1, 2 up. This middle point, 1, 2 up. This point, 1, 2 up. And finally, 1, 2 up. And you can see that my reflected graph now has been moved up 2 units, and it looks like that. So if you haven't already, I would just suggest pushing pause on the video and giving the next problem a try before I describe what to do, because that's how you're going to learn. You'll learn by trying and making mistakes and then seeing what you're supposed to do. So pause the video. Once you've done this one, again, we're going to summarize the 2 things that are happening to this graph. So this 2 outside the function means to multiply my y values by 2. And then the +4 inside means I'm going to take all of the points and I'm going to move them left 4 units. Okay. We'll multiply our y values by 2, and then we're going to move the whole thing left 4 units. Once again, this leftmost point, 0 times 2 is 0. This y value is 3, so when I multiply it by 2, I get 6. This 0 is 0. So I've got this stretched out like it's a rubber band. I've stretched it out. And now what I'm going to do with that graph is I'm going to move the whole thing left 4 units because of the +4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we connect the dots, and the red graph is the finished product. And there it is. It's been stretched and it's been translated left 4 units. As always, if I've skipped over something that you're struggling with, please ask me a question, reach out to me by email. I would love to respond to you. I'm going to flip the page. Now, what I would recommend you do, again, if you've not already done it, is for these 3 problems, example 16, example 17, and 18, is pause the video and draw the basic graphs that each of these are premised on. I'm going to do that right now. So pause the video. This first one is a square root graph. So here's my square root, basic graph. Just doing it in pencil so it's nice and light. This one is x cubed. So here's my x cubed basic graph. Again, doing it in pencil so that it doesn't distract me as I'm moving things around. And then this next one, I've got another square root graph because I'm fond of the square root graph. So we're going to take these one at a time. First graph, I would like you, well, let's go ahead and describe the things that are happening on this graph. And I'm just going to go through and work the problems now. So if you don't want me to spoil the surprise, pause the video and work the problems and then see how you did. So I'm just going to continue on. So example 16, the three things that are happening, the 1/2 means that I'm multiplying the y values by 1/2. The +7 means I'm moving the graph left 7. And then the -2 means I'm moving the graph down 2 units. Multiplication is the first thing that I'm going to do. So I'm going to multiply all my y values of this graph by 1/2. So 0 stays 0. The y value of this point is 1. So 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. The y value of this point is 2. So 2 times 1/2 is 1. And then the y value of this point is 3. So 3 times 1/2 is 1.5. So I'll make a dot there. And I'm just going to do this dotted. And there's my 1/2 times the square root of x graph. Now I'm going to take that graph that's black and dotted, and I am going to move it left 7 down 2. So left 7 down 2. So I'm going to take this first point at the origin, left 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down 2 right there. The next one, which is at y value of 1/2, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then down 1, down 2. The next one, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down 1, down 2. And last but not least, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down 1, down 2. And here is the graph. It has the same shape as the previous graph. It's just been moved left 7, down 2. Example 17. This time we only have 2 things that are being done to this graph. The first one is because of the negative out front, I'm going to multiply my y values by a -1. And then because of the -3, I'm going to then take the result and I'm going to move the whole thing to the right 3 units. So multiplication first. I'm going to multiply all the y values by -1. So this y value on the left is -8. So it becomes +8. This is a y value of -1. So it becomes +1. 0 stays 0. The y value of 1 becomes -1. The y value of 8 becomes -8. And there's my graph. So it's been reflected about the y-axis. About the x-axis because of that negative. And then I'm going to take that graph right there and I'm going to move the whole thing right 3 units. So starting on the left part of the graph, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 units. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 units. The origin, 1, 2, 3 units. Right here, 1, 2, 3 units. And then last but not least, 1, 2, 3 units. And I'll connect those dots. And there it is. Last problem. Again, there's only 2 things happening to this graph. Because of the negative inside on the x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this time the x values by -1. So this is going to be a reflection about the y-axis. And then because of the -6, that whole graph then will then go down 6 units. So first graph, I'm going to multiply all the x values by -1. So this x value is 0, so it stays 0. This x value is 1, so it becomes -1. This x value is 4, so it becomes -4. And this x value is 9, so it becomes -9. And so then here, I'm going to make a nice dotted graph. If I can do this, there we go. There is my reflected graph. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that graph and I'm going to move it down 6 units. So each of these points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops, I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. And I'll connect those dots. And the red graph is the finished product. The other graphs are just my phases. And all that matters, if you're doing this, if you can do this all in one step, then good on you. That's all that matters is that last graph. Practice, practice, practice. Send me questions. Take care, everybody.